Good evening, everybody. Naif Mubarak here in Mubarak Law in downtown Orlando. Wait for everybody to join us. We have a very special, knowledgeable, and genuine guest tonight, and I cannot wait to introduce him and share his wealth of knowledge with you all on some matters that can be very sensitive. So those are our 6:30 church bells that you can hear. So as you know, we're always on time and on schedule with our Facebook Lives every Thursday at Mubarak Law's Facebook page. So before we bring on our guest, I'm going to, as we normally do, go over some good news. Today, I attended an interview at USCIS for one of our clients who was a victim of domestic violence, whose husband tried to steal her green card and abandon her in a foreign country. And the officer was going to, hold the decision or request more evidence. And after I pointed out a lot of the evidence and the abandonment in a foreign country, he decided to grant the case on the spot, which doesn't happen very often. So I am very happy for her, who has already endured enough abuse, but now she has hopefully some independence and good news. Also, it's my brother's birthday. Habib Awad, happy birthday. Ahbab bin Sana. I know that you are out celebrating, and I will celebrate with you on Saturday. This Saturday, we will also be celebrating Halloween, so please be safe, wear your costumes. It's one of my favorite days, and we will also be sending out our monthly newsletter. So please be sure to subscribe to our social media and to our newsletter, and this way you can get up-to-date updates on changes in the law, on things affected by COVID, and any other important updates we have for you on immigration and personal injury. All right. So today's guest is a local Orlandoan who has at least obtained his bachelor's degree from Rollins. He has been practicing for nearly 30 years in the areas of medical malpractice. He has been inducted as a fellow for the American College of Trial Lawyers. Less than 1% of all trial lawyers have this recognition. And moreover, he has spoken at numerous events all over the country, including the Women's Health and OBGYN Nursing Conference in New Orleans. Richard Schwamm has been practicing, as I mentioned, for nearly 30 years and 25 years with the same firm. At his firm, they specialize in medical malpractice. So this is more than just personal injury. They specialize in, God forbid, wrongful death or issues happening during labor or any, wrongful terminations of pregnancies. They are the people that we trust our clients with, and I'll explain why. In addition to his 30 years experience, he has also volunteered for the Children's Safety Village of Central Florida, where he, provides his services to help better our communities. So we have a couple of people saying nice and hello. So thank you, Vesna. Thank you, Ashraf. Welcome, and thanks for watching. And without further ado, I'm going to bring on Attorney Richard Schwamm, who is a partner at Khalitzer, Pettis, and Schwamm. They have offices in Orlando as well as Fort Lauderdale, and Richard is the managing partner for the Orlando office and the lead first chair for most of the trials that his office conducts. Richard, thank you so much for joining me. How are you?
Good evening, Naif. I'm honored to be here. Thanks for inviting me to your Facebook Live. Thanks so much.
No, it's completely my pleasure. I know you're extremely busy managing your office and your caseload and the incredible work that you do. So I wanted to have you on so we can talk about your very specialized, nuanced area of work. We do get a lot of calls. This happened to me at the doctor's office. This happened to my sister. What can we do? Who can we do? And I always say you need to call Richard Schwamm. And the reason I say that is after I've sent you a few cases, I see the hours you spend with a person to determine whether or not they have a case without taking a dollar, without taking a dime, for the sole reason to make sure that you can answer their questions and help them out. So your due diligence is really exceptional. You're a professional, and I just can't say enough nice things about you. And I hope that we can educate our followers today on what medical malpractice really is, and when is medical malpractice and when it is not. So
thank you, I appreciate that. Very kind.
No problem. So what is it? We want to first, if anybody has any questions, you can contact Attorney Schwamm. I will save this, and you guys can and follow these banners later. And also his email is here as well. And they do have a Facebook page, HPS Legal, if you want to follow them and get updates on medical malpractice. So, Richard, I'll stop talking. Tell us a little bit about the difference between medical malpractice and personal injury. When is one personal injury and when is one medical malpractice?
Well, that's a great place to start because, personal injury cases, as you certainly know, and you are certainly well respected in our community to handle the personal injury cases, oftentimes involve car accidents, premises liability, where somebody gets hurt, not in a medical context, not a hospital, not a doctor, but there's an injury case. And the allegations that we make in those cases and you make in those cases is somebody wasn't safe. They didn't help prevent the injury. And car accidents are a perfect example. Our firm, when we handle medical malpractice cases, it's always in the context of healthcare, in a doctor's office, at a radiology practice, in a hospital. And medical malpractice is the legal term for medical mistake. Did somebody suffer a preventable injury or an avoidable injury? And typically it involves when somebody did something wrong, a doctor or a nurse did something wrong, or a doctor or nurse failed to do something that they should have done. So for example, if you go to the ER and they don't order an EKG and you've got chest pain, that was a failure to do something. Or if you go to the ER and they do an EKG and they misread it and they send you home and you die from a heart attack, that's an example of doing the thing they were supposed to do, but doing it wrong. So medical malpractice is a medical mistake.
Is these medical mistakes, I think a lot of people have a bad or a wide interpretation of what is a medical mistake. How do you decipher, is it through your experience or case law, what's considered malpractice? If somebody's scar is too apparent from a surgery or a plastic surgery was botched, what do you consider medical malpractice, and how do you actually make that determination?
That's a loaded question, so let me kind of start from the beginning. Okay. So not every injury is medical malpractice. Not every mistake is medical malpractice. If you were supposed to get one pill and the nurse gave you 3, but you weren't harmed, well, was it a mistake? Sure. But did it cause permanent harm? No. So we go through the analysis and understand we've handled more than 3,000 cases. I like to think we've seen almost everything there is. And most doctors, most hospitals are good. There's not a lot of medical malpractice. I think the perception is, oh my gosh, there's all of these medical mistakes. I'm scared to death to go to the hospital. That's not true. So what we have to find in a medical malpractice case, and I often explain to juries and clients, is I say, think about a medical malpractice case as a 3-legged stool. So a stool that is sturdy has 3 legs. Okay, so obviously the hospital owes a duty or a doctor duty of good care. But the 3-legged analysis is this. You have to show that there is a breach of the duty, a mistake. That's one leg. The other leg is causation. Did it cause harm? And the third leg is damages. You have to have all 3 of those. All 3 legs need to be sturdy to have a good case. If any one of them is missing, if you can't prove it was a mistake, if it didn't cause harm or you don't have serious injuries, one of the legs are gone, the stool falls down, and your case falls apart. So you have to be able to prove all of those elements in order to have a good medical malpractice case.
Now, can damages, I guess that's going to be another thing that's open for interpretation. Can damages be, I had to go to 2 extra appointments and miss work for them to do a follow-up? What constitutes actual damages in a medical malpractice? Or I think you might have alluded to it earlier. How do we know when somebody can state that they have damages?
Well, typically you have to have a permanent injury and a serious injury. And when I say serious, I mean serious, because medical malpractice cases, and we have a purposely small caseload. There are lots of firms in town that advertise. We do not. They handle thousands and thousands of cases. We do not. We have a small caseload so we can deliver the attention to the clients. And when we talk to clients about their injuries, it has to be a serious injury because one day you're going to be sitting in front of a jury. And if you look better than they do, they're not going to award you significant money. So you've got to have a significant injury. It's got to be, and it's unfortunate to talk about it like this, but it's a stroke, it's a heart attack, it's a death, it's a serious brain injury, it's a lost limb, it's a lost ability to do something important in your life. That's what we mean by serious injuries, because the cost of litigating these cases, on the low end, it's $25,000. On the high end, it can be more than $500,000 just in the cost to pursue a case. So the economics of it are, you've got to have a serious injury so that the time and money can be invested to try to get you the result that you want.
If you mentioned all sorts of different types of damages, losing a limb, wrongful death. This area, it's a very sensitive subject, but we do get a lot of calls about people who had, lost a baby, during a checkup or during delivery, or there's some type of damage that occurs to the children. Can an unborn child that didn't survive count as, damages? I don't want to use that word, or like wrongful death, I suppose, in this situation.
It's a great question, Ive. So I've handled a large number of obstetrical malpractice cases. Those are cases related to pregnancy, labor, and delivery. And sometimes it involves a lost pregnancy, and you can absolutely pursue a claim for that. It's called a negligent stillbirth case for a child that did not survive outside the womb. That's one kind of case. The other kind of case is a child that is born alive but passes away, and you don't get the explanation that you deserve from the hospital, the doctor, and that's when we get the phone call because we give that explanation. Sometimes it's peace of mind. Sometimes it's the answer that it's not someone's mistake. And sometimes it's a mistake made. And then the third kind of case related to labor and delivery has to do with a child that's born with a brain injury. And I've talked extensively to doctors, lawyers, and nurses all over the country to try to explain to them about how we teach a jury about whether or not this is a preventable injury or not. So those are the three kinds of labor and delivery cases we normally handle.
Is that the particular reason why you guys have nurses in your office, or former nurses? I found that so interesting, and I guess very smart and savvy. What is their role in your firm? Are they nurses turned paralegals? What can you tell us about them?
They are nurses and nurse administrators turned paralegals. So what they do is they help us evaluate and vet the cases. And what I tell people is we take 1 out of every 60 cases we look at. We don't take that many, but we talk to the other 59 cases, and we look at the medical records if it's appropriate to do so, and we talk to the parents or the people that are hurt and help explain, here's why we don't think there's malpractice, or here's why there might have been a mistake, but we don't know that the injury is going to be, quote, serious enough to justify moving forward with a lawsuit. So the nurses really help us with an evaluation of what's in the medical records. I can read the medical records and with our experience, see a lot of things that jump out at me, but oftentimes we need the experience of a 30 or 40-year nurse that works with us to help pick apart those subtle medical issues.
Now, you told me you take like 1 in 60 cases. You guys spend several weeks, sometimes months, investigating a case before you take it. When you seek a particular expert or a blood expert or a doctor expert, who has to front the cost? I mean, do the clients have to front the cost? A lot of times, unfortunately, malpractice, I think we've seen statistically, happens to a lot of lower income people. And they don't have the money to retain an attorney for somebody to seek their rights on something that happened to them. So what if somebody's concerned about the cost? They've already lost enough. They're worried about losing, their savings in order to pursue a claim, essentially.
I'm really glad you asked the question, because this is one of the ways we want to ease the mind of the folks that are listening. So we take cases on a contingency fee basis. So we get paid if we're able to win the case, which is a settlement or a verdict. What that means is all the cases we look at, when we request the records, when we hire experts, we front the cost. The client pays $0 if we don't take the case. So if I spend $4,000 to request records or $8,000 to hire an expert, and I look at the case and I don't think it's a valid case, my firm eats that. We pay that, the client pays nothing. The only time the client ever has to bear that cost is if we win the case, it gets deducted from the recovery. So there's no out-of-pocket to the client, no risk to the client.
Okay, I want to come back to labor issues and stillbirths, but first, for those of you who are just joining us, I'm with Attorney Richard Schwamm. He's been practicing law for over 29 years. He is an expert, in my opinion, at least in in medical malpractice. And please visit their website and maybe check out his bio. It is very much impressive. So with the medical issues that happen during labor and stillbirth, who has the right to make a claim if there is an unmarried husband? And then I guess the follow-up question is that if the baby passes, God forbid, or there's a brain injury, the parents are going to be busy dealing with this loss or grieving this issue. At what point in time is there a cutoff for them to seek a claim or to maybe look into whether or not medical malpractice occurred?
Well, let's walk through a typical case like that. So if the parents are expecting the delivery of a healthy baby, everything has gone well during their prenatal care, and during labor and delivery, there's a rush to do a C-section because the child looks like he's not tolerating the labor process well, and he's born and he has a significant brain injury. That is an unexpected outcome. So the parents have 2 years to pursue a malpractice case from the date of that delivery. But I urge the parents, don't wait for 1 year and 10 months and then reach out to a lawyer. You need to reach out soon because it takes a lot of time to do the investigation. We want to help preserve the evidence in the medical records. So we get involved early. So once that happens, there are 3 people that have a claim and can recover damages. Number 1, the child. That is our priority. As you pointed out, I'm heavily involved in child advocacy, child injury prevention, and I never lose sight that that case is about your baby that we're going to try to help. But the parents also have a right to recover for their expenses, for the impact emotionally that has had on them. So there are 3 clients. The core is the child. And we help relieve the pressure of the parents worrying about the lawsuit because that's my job, not theirs. So once we get involved, there's some involvement of the parents, and they can be very involved in the litigation. But my goal is kind of relieve them of that pressure. They've got enough to worry about, as you pointed out, and we take it from there. And this process takes a long time. So they need to be patient.
Okay. Before we get about the timeline, I do have a question, and it's a little bit improvised. Immigrants, people with no status. A lot of my clients will say, I don't want to stir the pot. I don't want to make problems. I don't want to sue anybody because I don't have status. We obviously at Mubarak Law will have a lot of clients who may fall into this category or have family members that are, and maybe they never thought to pursue it because the mother was undocumented, for example. Does this even come into play in any type of medical malpractice case, if whether or not you're a status or a U.S. citizen here, or is it irrelevant?
I'm glad you brought it up because you and I have talked about this issue in the past because I absolutely am sensitive to the fact that if you're not a U.S. citizen, do you want to draw more attention to yourself by filing a lawsuit? The bottom line from my perspective is you do not need to be a U.S. citizen to pursue a medical malpractice case. Yeah. And you have been helpful kind of to help navigate through the choppy waters of concern about whether or not that's going to raise some eyebrows, draw some attention, things of that nature. So smart lawyers will tend to bring in experts like yourself to say, okay, do we need to worry about this? Is there something you can do? All of those questions you help answer, but what I can answer is, can somebody who is not a U.S. citizen pursue a case? The simple answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. I know we see it all the time, and I tell people, even sometimes in divorce proceedings, they're scared that, oh, maybe I don't have a right for my children. So please, if you're watching, at least ask me, ask Richard, reach out to us. I promise you have some sort of rights in this situation, and don't let something like status come in the way. A lot of times, if you are a victim of a crime, you might qualify for a visa. Not the whole point is to speak out against things that have happened against you. So please don't hesitate to reach out to one of us. Um, if something happens during delivery or labor or any procedure, uh, who do we sue? Is it a doctor? Is it a hospital? How much? I got a lot of questions for you. So I'll start with, who do we sue?
Sure. Great question. When there's an injury, my job is to figure out who's at fault. So what we do is we approach this with as broad a brush as we can, and then we narrow it down. So we look at the entire situation. Was there a failure of communication between the nurse and the doctor? Whose fault was that? Sometimes we can figure it out, sometimes we can't. And sometimes it's both of their responsibilities. So we will sue the hospital, who is responsible for its employees, the nurses. We will sue the doctor. Sometimes there's a nurse midwife involved or a nurse practitioner. And as we get into these cases, sometimes we find that there's a pharmacy error. You can sue the hospital for the pharmacy error. Sometimes there's a delay in transfer to another hospital. There might be another hospital that has to be named. So it's not really an easy question to answer right out of the box, because we have to get the records and pick it apart. But that's our job. So there have been cases where I have one defendant, a doctor, and there are cases where I have 14 defendants, because there's different doctors and hospitals involved, and everybody has a share in responsibility for the unfortunate outcome.
And do they ever turn on each other, like hospital and doctor, or the defendants in a lawsuit?
Well, unfortunately, some people don't take responsibility when they make a mistake, right? And when I take depositions of witnesses, I'll either hear, wasn't my fault, or every once in a while you say, yeah, it was my fault, or it wasn't my fault, it was his fault. And the strategy in these cases, candidly, is if I see that happening, that's always a good thing for us. It doesn't help the victim. It doesn't help the person who's injured. But from a medical malpractice strategy perspective, as you can imagine, when people blame each other, remember who's going to be listening to the evidence at some future date. It's 6 people that we don't know that are going to be hearing this for the first time. And jurors hate it when people don't take responsibility. I used to be a defense lawyer years ago when I represented hospitals and doctors. And one of the first cases I ever took to trial, I represented a hospital and we left a sponge in the patient.
Wow.
And I stood in front of the jury and I said, we messed up. We should absolutely pay this person for the harm that we caused. But in that case, she was exaggerating and lying about her injuries. So we were able to tell them, we think the value of the case is X, but don't give her Y. It's like, look, if you're playing baseball and you break somebody's window, that doesn't mean you need to paint their house. In that case, you should pay for the harm, but not for what they were claiming.
How do you have that conversation with your clients about how much you think the case is worth, or the limits of recovery? How does that kind of come into play? Because, they see the billboards, so-and-so got me 5 million or 2 million or $1 million. What is a realistic, when I typically tell people, you don't want that kind of recovery. That means something catastrophic has happened to you. But in your situation, I imagine most of these things are catastrophic in nature. So what are the recoveries look like, or how can you predict that?
If you look at some of the patrols we have, and we don't put this on billboards, we've recovered more than $50 or $60 million for clients over the years. But that doesn't mean your case is worth $50 million or $10 million or $10,000. It is an individualized analysis. So when we speak to folks about what's happened, and I get asked this question very early on, what do you think my case is worth? It's driven by 2 things. Number one, we can look at jury verdicts and settlements in the area, in the locale, and find out what do juries tend to award in a case that's successful. We can look at our own personal experiences over the years. We need to look at the available insurance coverage for the doctor and the hospital, because many times that can have an impact on the valuation of the case. But any lawyer who tells you in the first meeting what your case is worth, you should run in the other direction, because there is no way any lawyer worth their weight is going to be able to tell you the value of your case. It takes time.
So run in the other direction leads to, who do I hire? How do I know to find somebody with medical practice? Because, everybody does personal injury, right? Everybody's doing a personal injury. Attorneys, young attorneys, new attorneys, they believe that this is the most profitable legal practice. How can people who are not attorneys, who don't know many attorneys, find a proper medical malpractice attorney, in your opinion, to represent them?
It's a great question. I think having a really good rapport with your lawyer is critical, because you're going to be spending some time. It's like a relationship. So I think finding somebody who is a good communicator, just like when you're looking for a spouse, you want to find that good communicator. So I think finding somebody who's going to communicate well with you is critical. You've got to look at experience. Like I said, we used to be on the defense side. So we understand how hospitals and doctors look at cases. I've defended some of the biggest cases all around the state of Florida. And after evaluating 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 cases over the year, I think that puts us in a good position to know a good case when we see it, and to know how to press all the right buttons in the litigation to optimize the value. So you need to look at a good communicator. You need to look at the experience. And I think you want to look for lawyers that don't have 1,000 cases. I mean, you want to know that your lawyer is to give out your case almost every day. And I can promise you, if I had 1,000 cases, I would not be thinking about your case every day. When I was a defense lawyer, I had 140 cases. That's a lot of medical malpractice cases to have. Now I've got 17. And that's on purpose, because I want my clients to know when they call me, I'm going to know exactly the status of your case, what our next steps are. And you will have already heard from me through a lot of communication. So I think you really want to find the lawyers with the experience, who probably have a purposely small caseload, and they're going to be good communicators for you.
Richard, we are nearly going to run out of time soon. Anything you would like to add before I start my spiel about next week?
Sure. First, thanks for asking me to join. I really have enjoyed this, and I'm glad that you asked. And I really want folks really to understand that they need, and they really have a right to get their questions answered. I mean, it's not your job to know, do I have a good medical malpractice case? That's my job. And many times I just give people peace of mind. We've got a team of folks that can talk to you if I'm not available. And I just don't want people to be afraid to pick up the phone and say, the lawyer's not going to think my case is worth anything. Let me help educate you and inform you about how medical malpractice law applies to your case. At a minimum, I'll give you peace of mind. And if it's a good case, then we've got something more to talk about.
I think peace of mind is probably one of the most valuable things. I can't tell you how many heartbroken parents, young parents, have come to me about something that's happened during their delivery of their child. And they just want to know. I mean, somebody wants to know, was something done wrong, or was this just kind of written or fate? So I think they deserve to know that. People deserve to know that. And I do appreciate how much time you spend on clients or potential clients, just to determine if they are even eligible for a medical malpractice case. We have some comments I just want to show. Ms. Fryzon saying, great question. My cousin Hazem, good evening, cuz. Kifak, how are you? I'm glad that we have all sorts of people joining us today. Also, 2 more days of early voting, or 1 more day, or vote on the big day. I don't care who you're voting for, vote. Enjoy our constitutional rights. Only if you're a U.S. citizen. If you're not a citizen, don't try to vote. Celebrate Halloween. Be safe. Next week, we will be doing immigration updates. The following week, we will have a licensed therapist on the show to talk about domestic violence issues. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month, and we will be talking about that. We are about 5 likes away from 3,000 likes. So if I can just humbly ask you guys to like our page, so that way we can hit that number, or follow us, I would be very much appreciating it. And follow us on YouTube. Richard, thank you so much. Thank you for your gift and your friendship. I reach out to Richard whenever there's like a question about trials and negotiating against these insurance companies. He's a great resource and contributor to our community. And I really can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Thanks, Naf. I appreciate it.
All right, everybody. We will see you here next week, Thursday at 6:30. And if you have any questions or comments, just write your story in an email. You can email it to me and I'll forward it to Richard, and we'll see if there's anything that can be done. If anything has happened within the last 2 years, or when you discovered it within the last 2 years, please let us know. One final hello before we say goodbye. Stacy Schwamm. Evening, Ms. Schwamm. How are you? And I hope you're enjoying your beautiful kitchen and pool. And I will see you guys next time. Richard, thanks again.
Thanks, my friend. Nice to see you.